From Zechariah chapter 2. Then I looked up, and there before me was a man with a measuring line in his hand. I asked, "Where are you going?" He answered me, "To measure Jerusalem, to find out how wide and how long it is." Then the angel who was speaking to me left, and another angel came to meet him and said to him, "Run, tell that young man, Jerusalem will be a city without walls because of the great number of men and livestock in it. And I myself will be a wall of fire around it, declares the Lord, and I will be its glory within. Come, come, flee from the land of the north, declares the Lord, for I have scattered you to the four winds of heaven, declares the Lord. Come, O Zion, escape, you who live in the daughter of Babylon. For this is what the Lord Almighty says, after he has honoured me and has sent me against the nations that have plundered you, for whoever touches you touches the apple of his eye. I will surely raise my hand against them so that their slaves will plunder them. Then you will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me. Shout and be glad, O daughter of Zion, for I am coming, and I will live among you, declares the Lord. Many nations will be joined with the Lord in that day and will become my people. I will live among you, and you will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me to you. The Lord will inherit Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and will again choose Jerusalem. Be still before the Lord, all mankind, because he has roused himself from his holy dwelling. We've seen already in Ezra and earlier in Zechariah that God is stirring up his people to return to Jerusalem, to rebuild the temple, and then rebuild the city. And today we see it's going to be a great place. It's going to be so big it needs to be measured with a great number of people and animals, a sign of blessing. Genesis 8, chapter 17. The reverse of Jeremiah 33, even though according to Haggai, the opposite was more like the reality. But we find that it's so big that it will be a city without walls. How will this be? We ask, how will it be defended? And didn't Nehemiah build walls for it? Well, remember, this is a vision. It's a message about the future. A vision, there are two parts to it. There's part one, the physical fulfillment, the expansion, the prosperity of the physical city of Jerusalem. But there's also part two, something more than physical, something timeless and spiritual. So what we read about this new Jerusalem is verse 4, it's going to be big and prosperous. Verse 5, God himself is going to be its defender. God is going to live among them. Now, we have to be careful with the translation here, for a more accurate translation would be dwell, and again verse 10. Now, dwell is the language of the tabernacle. They knew that he would be living with them as the temple is being rebuilt. God dwelling with his people requires the rebuilding of the temple. And so, get on and do it. And that's what they are doing in Ezra. The temple is being rebuilt, and that was how God was going to return and dwell with them. Then attention turns to the second city of this vision, Babylon. And this, if you like, is the flip side. There's going to be judgment coming for God's enemies. So it's sort of saying, listen, if you're a Jew still living in Babylon, flee, so you're not caught up in the judgment. And look, if you're living in Jerusalem, yeah, things are hard at the moment, but don't think about going back to your old life back in Babylon. Yeah, it might have felt comfortable, and yeah, you might be tempted to go back. don't. Pay attention to what God is saying through Zechariah. That, of course, is also the theme of Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 6. Flee from Babylon, run for your lives. Don't be destroyed because of her sins. It's time for the Lord's vengeance. He will repay what she deserves. Listen, things might seem great in Babylon at the moment, and let's be honest, it's so much easier than here in Jerusalem. But listen, it's going to get a whole lot worse for Babylon. It's a warning. Flee, escape. But why is this punishment coming? Well, verse 7, they've plundered his people, and so they will be plundered. And see how he regards his people, the apple of his eye. Isn't that a beautiful phrase? Babylon, these other nations, they've injured something precious to God. The apple of his eyes, something intimate and personal. Remember Deuteronomy chapter 32 verses 9 and 10. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob has allotted inheritance. In a desert land he found him. In a barren and howling waste he shielded him and cared for him. He guarded him as the apple of his eye. If you like, Babylon has been poking a stick in the eye of God, and he will not tolerate it. So get out while you can. Life might seem easy at the moment, but look what's coming round the corner, Zechariah is saying. And then that tender language towards his people is repeated in verse 12, where it says, God will inherit Judah as his portion. That just shows how precious his people are to him. They're his inheritance. They're the ones he's chosen to be his portion out of all the peoples of the world. So what will happen to the people of Babylon, to the other nations? Verse 11. Well, they've got a chance to be joined with God's people and become his people. That reference to my people implies covenant language. They too can become part of God's covenant people if they choose to. The offer of being part of God's people is open to all. So what are they to do? Well, be still, stop and think. Listen, destruction's coming. But salvation is available because the Lord's on the move. Now, that's an incredible message, isn't it, to the people of Zechariah's time? But it's more incredible for us to listen to. You see, Jerusalem was a special place for the Jews because it was the place where God dwells among his people. 3 times in the vision, God says he will live in Jerusalem. And for us, where does God live? Well, in Jesus. He's the dwelling place of God. Remember, John chapter 1 verse 14, we hear it every Christmas. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. You see, God at the moment is busy building a new Jerusalem. So he's building one physically at the time of Ezra and Zechariah. But listen to this from Revelation chapter 21. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people. He will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and will be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, no more mourning, crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Wow. And that's our future. Although At the moment, it may seem a long way off. But like the people of Zechariah's time, we need to see that final picture. And what about Babylon? Well, remember Revelation chapter 17, verse 4. The woman was dressed in a purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold and precious stones and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery. Babylon, the great, the mother of prostitutes and the abominations of the earth. It's the personification of all who oppose God. It might look nice now, but what's going to happen to her? Revelation 18 verse 2. With a mighty voice he shouted, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling for demons and a haunt for every impure spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable animal." But are all doomed? Well, no. Many nations can become part of the New Jerusalem. That's through Jesus. He died for the sins of the whole world. He commissioned his disciples to take this message to all nations. We have the great promises of the New Jerusalem. But yet, if we're honest, we've got the present reality to work through. And life may seem easier in Babylon. We may be tempted to go back to our old lifestyle, our old friends, our family who don't understand us. Life may seem so much easier reverting back to our old ways of living. But we need to heed this message. Flee and escape. Because Babylon is a symbol of living in this world. We're born, all of us, into the captivity of slavery in Babylon. To become a Christian is to consciously leave the comfortable life in Babylon where we can do what seems like what we want. But look what's going to happen. Judgment is coming. Get out is the warning. And to those who have left Babylon, who are part of God's kingdom, to those who perhaps call themselves Christians today, well, make sure you stay put. Don't look back. Then I heard another voice from heaven say, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues." Do you see why every one of us has to make a choice for ourselves? Escape Babylon, for judgment and destruction are coming, and become part of God's New Jerusalem, where there are no more tears, no more pain, no more crying, no more mourning. And once you've made that decision, stay. And don't go back, no matter how tempted you may feel. Tale of two cities, Jerusalem or Babylon. Which one are you a member of?